Hey everyone, and welcome back or welcome to the channel. If you are new here, this is my 2023 Subaru WRX. I've owned it for exactly 3 months to the day that I'm filming this video, and in fact, I've come back to the same parking lot that I introduced this car to the channel. I purchased this car with only one goal in mind, and that was to learn how to drive manual and become proficient at it. And so far, I think I've done a pretty good job learning how to drive manual and get comfortable where I can hop into other cars with a stick and be right at home. But a lot of enthusiasts, a lot of people who are interested in getting into a car with a manual might be apprehensive. They might be a bit nervous, wondering, do I really want to go down that direction? You know, I'm afraid of me burning the clutch or ruining the transmission. And you hear all these horror stories, and also you have people that will tell you, you're not a real enthusiast unless you drive a manual, or you're not a real man unless you know how to drive a stick. All this is garbage, all this is baloney. The most important thing is to learn a skill that I think is going to be very helpful if you do want to own maybe an old Porsche 911 or an old muscle car from the 80s or 90s. And in this video, I want to go over everything I've learned about driving manual the past 90 days, the good and the bad. Is it really as difficult to learn as some people think? Or also, is it worth daily driving a WRX, which I've done for the past 90 days? We're gonna find out. So if you're ready, then I'm ready. Let's dive right into this video. Many purists and enthusiasts create this notion that the idea of driving a manual is almost esoteric, that it's mythical, that it's some elite skill that only a few people are worthy enough to ever learn. When in actuality, I think anyone can learn how to drive stick and can do so very quickly. One of the first observations I've made owning the WRX and learning how to drive manual is that it's actually very easy, and that the only thing you really need to overcome is your fear and your apprehension. That will be the biggest obstacle. Helping me get comfortable with the idea of learning how to drive manual is understanding that a lot of it comes down to muscle memory and that it will become second nature eventually. But before you even set off on your first drive, and even though we have a nice big parking lot here where there's going to be no cars, you can stall, you can make mistakes, not get beeped at when you are at a red light or at an intersection. It's all going to come down to understanding where your gears are, but also where that bite point is. So with the WRX, of course, you have 6 gears. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And then if you want to do reverse, it's up and to the right. Some cars only have 5 gears, and your reverse might be on the left. But this is going to be very helpful because sometimes there might be situations where you may accidentally money shift or you might go in the wrong gear. But understanding where those gears are will help you not make those mistakes. I think a lot of it is eliminating the possibilities of making the mistakes before you even hit the road. Then, of course, when it comes to the bite point for the clutch, obviously you would learn that first. But because this isn't a tutorial, I just want to emphasize that it comes down to muscle memory and repetition. That is the key to learning how to drive manual and getting comfortable with it in a very short period of time. Now, after about week 2 or 3 of learning how to drive manual and driving this car on a daily basis, it got to a point where it became second nature and felt very natural to me, almost to a point where my subconscious took over. Now, I'm not going to go over the process of where the bite point is on the WRX. Just want to show you guys how simple it's become and how seamless it is to get this car rolling and get into second gear, at least in this parking lot. So, parking brake down, foot in the clutch, over to the first. I'm at the bite point, and I'm ready to roll. And into second. Hey, you got to remember too, I went 15 years driving automatic, and it took me about a week or two to get comfortable doing this on a consistent basis, whether it is driving around in the city or suburbs, or even just in a parking lot such as this, where I've gotten to the point where I'm very comfortable, there's no apprehension, no nerves at all. And that is one thing you'll have to get used to when you're first starting out driving manual for the first time. And then one more thing I want to point out here before I get on to my second observation is that when you are learning, this isn't really a good habit to have, but when you are in a parking lot such as this, just put it back into neutral, whether you are in first or second gear. That way, you can let off the braking, let off the clutch, and you're not going to stall the car at all. Now, of course, it is going to move, so I don't have the parking brake, but neutral can be your friend when you're first starting out. It's not something you want to rely on later on when you are driving on the streets, but when you are learning and you don't want to get in a situation where you're constantly stalling, because maybe that will set you off, going to put you in a bad mind frame, always remember, neutral is your best friend in an empty parking lot. Observation number 2 is not to overthink things, which is extremely difficult, especially if you're going to be learning on your friend's car, because you don't want to destroy their car, you don't want to get into an accident, but you also don't want to hear them say, you're going to burn my clutch, man. Bro, please don't money shift. I don't want to blow my transmission here. And that was ultimately why I wanted a car for myself with a manual, so that I could make the mistakes, no one else was going to be there, I didn't need to worry about hurting my friends' feelings, and that if something broke, it was my responsibility and I could easily pay for it myself and not have that on my shoulders if I broke my friend's car. I fully understand that a lot of you have different financial backgrounds and situations, so most likely you're not going to be buying a $35,000 brand new WRX for your first manual car. But I would recommend going out and getting a beater, a cheap car that you can burn the clutch, you can money shift, you can do some catastrophic damage to, and it's not going to set you back financially in a major way. Now, today in 2024, it's a bit more difficult to find those cars, but if you can find one that is, maybe under $5,000, I would say definitely go for it, because you need a car that you can live with 24/7, a car that you can take to work, you can go on some nice weekend joyrides, and you don't have to worry about damaging your friends' cars. You don't need to really have to rely on them. That is one thing that I would definitely go for if you really truly want to learn how to drive manual. Next, and this really isn't an observation as it is a benefit to learning how to drive manual, is that you become very connected to the car that you're driving. And in a way, it becomes a relationship where it's no longer just about you, it's also about the car as well. Your goals and the car's goals have to align. And what I mean by that is that when you're driving automatic, you just apply pressure to the brake and gas pedal and you continue on with your journey. But when you're driving manual, you got to understand when to upshift, when to downshift. Sometimes your car doesn't like when you're shifting a little too late or a little too early. You got to understand that when you're approaching an intersection, you're going to want to downshift, otherwise you might stall out. There's going to be times where you're experiencing things for the first time and the car either stalls or there's something that doesn't feel right, and you need to correct your driving habits. You need to correct things so that way your experience behind the wheel is going to be smooth and seamless. And ultimately, that's why a lot of enthusiasts and purists prefer driving manual over the automatic, because it's not just the involvement, the physical involvement of manually upshifting and downshifting, understanding the mechanical aspects of getting this car moving and slowing down without stalling, but also understanding that you need to put your foot in the clutch and everything else that comes along with it. It's also, to a certain degree, that you're building a mental and emotional connection to the car that you're driving with the stick. And I think a lot of people from the outside world are going to say, isn't it kind of weird that you're talking about a non-living entity as if it's a human being? And I was one of those people. But one thing I will say, though, is that driving manual, having driven manual for 3 months now, this car to me feels like it's breathing and is alive more so than my GTI. And honestly, nothing's different other than driving manual. But when you get to the point where you're understanding that this car has certain goals that it wants certain things, such as it wants to be upshifted at certain times, it wants to be downshifted, you don't want to lug the engine, all of a sudden, it's no longer just a material object. It's in essence a living, breathing thing. And honestly, that helped me get very comfortable driving manual. But also, a good friend of mine told me, Mike, you'd have to be an idiot to destroy your car. You have to be an idiot to blow the transmission, to burn the clutch out, to blow the engine. Sure, is money shifting bad? Absolutely. Is not rev matching when you're downshifting bad? Absolutely. There's things that you need to do to ensure that you don't hurt this car prematurely. And a little story here to help you guys out is that one thing I recently learned is that when I was downshifting into second, I was constantly revving a bit too high. I had a friend tag along with me, and he said to me, Mike, you're really revving a bit too much heading into second. I would try fixing that. So I would analyze what I was doing wrong. And one thing I found out was that I was downshifting into second a little too early, that I needed to wait for the revs to drop a little bit, maybe slow down the car, so that I could comfortably get into second and I wasn't over revving. Sure enough, After understanding that I was making that mistake, I got to a point where rev matching in a second wasn't too much of a big deal. Then to wrap up, there's two more observations. One's a negative, the other's a positive. Let's start off with a negative. And with the negative, a lot of you are probably wondering, well, Mike, you've been driving automatics for 15 years. You've only been driving manual for 3 months. Is there times where you would like to go back to the GTI and not drive the WRX, such as in traffic or maybe in the city? And I would agree with a lot of enthusiasts where they prefer having a manual for the weekend and an automatic for the 5 days of the week. I've reversed that because I want to learn how to drive manual. I want to put myself in different situations so that I am going to be ready for anything that comes my way. So I'm kind of really doing everything in a short period of time just so that I can be very comfortable rather than extend this out over a period of 6, 9, 12 months. But I will say though, one thing that I have learned is that in stop and go traffic, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't mind having to have my foot in the clutch all the time and then constantly upshifting, downshifting, being in second, going back to first. I don't mind that as much. The time that I really don't like being behind the wheel of the WRX and driving manual is late at night. And when I'm physically and mentally fatigued, and actually this happened last week where I had a friend with me, I'm kind of tired, I went to the gym a couple hours earlier, but also I was working on a project for work, and I was just ready to tap out. I'm like, mentally, I am done. I just want to get home, watch a basketball game, and call it quits. And what I noticed was that I was making mistakes. I was going back to the same bad habits that I had picked up earlier on in my manual driving journey. And even on my way home, thinking, I wish I brought the GTI. As much as I love driving the WRX, I was not prepared that at like 10 o'clock that I'd be this tired. And it's not just the fact that, oh, this is, a safety issue, but it's more along the lines of just, I don't want to upshift and downshift. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to be in that mentality anymore. I'm ready to just cruise along, listen to my favorite music, and get home. And that's the one time that I really don't want to be driving the WRX or driving manual. So I think that whether it's an automatic or a manual, they both have their place in time. I do like driving automatic still, even though the WRX has been a completely different experience. It's been a fun experience at that. And I've even said that it's a life-changing experience learning how to drive manual because it opens the door to so many opportunities, not only in my career because I work in the auto industry, but also I can now go out and buy a car that I've always wanted to own from the late 90s, early 2000s when I was a kid. So from that standpoint, learning how to drive manual has really been a beneficial experience for my life, but also been a great skill to learn at the age of 31. And then lastly, but most importantly, is that driving a manual has made me a better driver. I'm more conscientious, I'm more aware of my surroundings, and together it's made me a safer motorist, not only for myself, but for everyone else around me and my passengers. When you're driving in the city or suburbs, you have to be a bit more thoughtful with your actions. You can't just take it for granted where you're going to be accelerating or you're going to be braking very hard. You have to know that you're going to be manually downshifting and upshifting, and with that thoughtfulness, I think you're going to really appreciate driving in general. It's not just something we take for granted, but it really truly is a privilege, and the WRX has taught me that. Having driven automatic for 15 years, I take things a bit more seriously when I'm behind the wheel with this car, and I think that if you learn how to drive manual, you're going to see the same thing. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, let me know in the comment section below what you've experienced learning how to drive manual or what you've learned throughout the years driving a car with a stick. But guys, once again, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.